Hi. Hi, guys. Um, Hi. I'm really excited about today. I'm going to talk with Devin, Devin Way, and I'm going to see if he's on yet. Devin, if you are there. Yeah. Hey! What's up, boo?
How you do? You look amazing. I'm digging these hoops.
Oh, thank you. I love my hoops. Hold on, let me set my phone up. I stole my boyfriend's office for this, and so I'm a little bit out of pocket. Hold on.
All right, no worries. I'm
Just gonna
check it out.
put you on some books. Hiding in my sweatpants in here. How are you?
Listen, I've been doing so good. Like,
Good.
so good. Like, just, yeah, I mean, like, I know, like, there's all these things going on in the world right now that are so, like, heavy and, like, ugly and, like, necessary to look at. But,
Yeah.
what this great awakening and, like, silence has brought, like, being home and, like, being by myself is
Mm-hmm.
this, like, deep evaluation to just look at myself and, like, truly learn how to love me. And
Wow.
so that's where I feel like I'm at, is, like I love myself, and
Oh,
it's
yes.
like, that's, yeah.
I
So how are
love that
you?
energy. Huh?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired today. I just had to take one of those like wake up showers where I was like, I like texted you and then I was like, I am way too tired to like, I need to like do something. So I took a shower and like now I feel so much better, which is why my hair's wrapped up.
Oh, it's a look. It's a
Thanks.
look.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done a head wrap in quite a long time because I had my braids in for so long that like I didn't really do just I there wasn't any space on my head for anything else. But um, so let's talk about your topic because we're going to keep this one short and sweet. We'll talk for about half an hour, you guys, and then we're going to cut it. But so let's talk about your topic. I thought this one was really cool. What made you want to choose it and introduce
So
it? Go ahead.
yeah, so for me, I really wanted to pick culture, race, ethnicity, and nationality because when I saw it on the list, I didn't really know much of the difference. I was like, if
Mm-hmm.
someone was like, "What's the difference between race, ethnicity, and culture?" I'd be like, I, it, it,
Right.
like right off the bat. So I was like, that's something that I've always wondered and like fumbled with myself in trying to like be the most like politically correct about. And so I thought that it posed like the best option in terms of educating myself and then getting to share that with the community.
Yeah.
And something I thought was really cool that I learned specifically about culture is that culture isn't like inherited. It's like what you it's learned. It's always learned.
Yeah.
So like when you're born, you're not born with culture.
Right.
Like the culture has been taught and is surrounding you. And I was like, that is so powerful in the like it's such a powerful thing to know that like the things we believe and even the subcultures that like are within our great culture as America, like we have these subcultures of like hate, these subcultures of like racism, these subcultures of like um, like empowerment and like all these wonderful things too, and to know that it's still part of a bigger culture, which is our society.
Sure. Yeah. So can you like give us just a little bit of a, I mean, of course you made your video, but like, is there any way to like shorthand what you discovered about the differences between the four things? I mean, you covered culture. And so then what about race, ethnicity, and nationality?
Yeah, so race essentially is associated by literally just the way you look. So if I was to walk into a room and look at myself in a mirror, I'd be like, oh, I have brown skin, dark curly hair. Then that would be I would be given, oh, he's black. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, someone with lighter skin, they're white. That's how
Mm-hmm.
race is associated.
Mm-hmm.
Ethnicity is based on the way a person specifically identifies and
Mm-hmm.
also their cultural expression.
Wow,
So
cool.
yeah, so I was like, that's cool. And then nationality is simply based on where you were born and where you live currently.
Sure. Okay. So that's so cool. I never really thought of ethnicity as sort of the combination of all of that, of like race and culture and how those things come together. Um, that's super interesting because I think that what I wanted to ask you and what I thought we could talk a little bit about is sort of what our backgrounds are and sort of how like as so yeah, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background if you don't mind?
So my ethnic background, my dad is black and my mom's white.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in deep East Texas. So in a culture that is like very Southern, um, very what are the words? Like very, I guess, like small minded is not the word. It's like very limited in terms of like the diversity that is seen,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And my dad wasn't very present in my life, so I grew up in my mom's world, my white world, right? And so culturally, I associated myself and clung to the whiteness, right, that I was taught, like, and didn't have a lot of opportunity in learning about my blackness and my black culture and those things. So it was interesting as I've become like a man and responsible for myself, like how I've gotten to then step into ownership and be like, okay, while I wasn't raised with like educating myself on like how to do black hair, you know, like because I don't have white hair, like how to like take care of myself and like deal with the discrimination that I face that my brothers and sisters and my mom and my aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandparents, as great as they are, never faced, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's been really cool. And also saying that like just because I wasn't taught this doesn't mean I don't have access and don't have a right to this, you know.
Yeah.
So that's been a really big part of my journey recently is saying like just because I wasn't raised with black voice doesn't mean that I don't have a right to my black voice as someone who's
Absolutely.
biracial.
Like even then, just a second ago when you said I don't have black hair, I was like, well, you got black hair because you're a black guy. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
all like regardless of where your voice lands on the sort of continuum and the spectrum of race, it's like you have what you are. You know what I mean? Like there's this complicated um, there's been all of these sort of recent I talked about it a couple of weeks ago with Lachlan. I think this sort of purity test of like what makes someone black or what makes someone we were talking about Kamala Harris specifically, but you know, like I'm also biracial. I have a black dad and a white mom. And so like, you know, I think it's so, I was actually super excited that you chose this. And I was excited to talk about this with you because it's like, we have sort of a similar, we have a similar racial makeup, but we culturally have experienced very different things, you know? And like, I also similarly, I grew up with both of my parents. They were divorced, but they were both in my life. But I went to private school growing up. And, you know, so some of that experience, like, and I grew up in the school I went to was on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park and associated with the University of Chicago. So, and we had a large percentage of our class was Jewish. So I had sort of that experience that I went to a ton of bar and bat mitzvahs growing like in seventh grade. Like you know, so it was like culturally I had a different experience than my siblings who have grown up with a black dad and a black mom in Virginia. And are now, you know, at school at an HBCU, and they've had an entirely different experience than I did growing up. But like, we're all of the same family. So culturally, you know, it's so interesting how we start to identify because I feel like I had a similar experience to you. And it's been also in the last, I think, I'd say probably in the last 5 to 10 years that I feel like I've really embraced um, my identity. And I personally identify as a black woman. I think when I was younger, I struggled more with that. I wanted to say I'm biracial, I'm both, I'm everything. I'm, you know, and while that's totally legitimate, and I totally understand that people, it's so individual. It's everyone's choice about how they want to express their racial identity. But there's so much strength, I think, in claiming sort of how the world experiences you, and then owning the fact that you experience the world in a certain way that might be influenced on how you look. And that can be really painful and also really illuminating and refreshing in a way, and like release this like tension that you might feel.
Oh, I love how you just said it. You know, it's like claiming how the world experiences you. You
Yeah.
know, and growing up from my lens, like I grew up, and I wasn't outrightly told that like being black was of a lesser class, but from like being grown in the deep South, where there, like I wasn't around any, like maybe two. There were two black people I think in my class growing up in school. You know, and like that community was so isolated that when I would hear about them or like see certain members of my family, it would always be talked. Black people would be talked about in a lesser fashion, you know, even if it wasn't quote unquote racism. So I inherited culturally as a child that prejudice, and
Sure.
so like I clung right to my whiteness, and then it's only been in recent years that like I've been able to once look at myself and be like, wait, no, like that prejudice shouldn't exist. Like you're trying that prejudice is real because you're trying to escape what people project onto you. Like that look in someone's eyes when you're walking and you see a woman clutch her purse, or like when like someone who is white is treated better than you simply because like I was like that's the reason why you started showing up so like cute and non-threatening, you know, and like
Wow.
would even describe yourself as like cool but non-threatening. And I was like, it's because there's this pre-existing prejudice that like says that like people of color are less than, and that's why you've clung to this white side of you. And so in taking ownership, like you just said, of like how the world sees me and be like, I am a black man, but I'm also just. I am a black man and I'm also like intelligent. I'm smart, I'm kind, I'm non-threatening, I'm like important, and I'm like all these things. And black people and their culture are also rich in all of these powerful things,
Yeah, shit.
right?
And
And so,
everyone like there's just this, I mean, obviously we've seen in the recent events in Kenosha, it's crazy. We are living in a surreal but yet very real hellscape. So but you know that anybody can be anything, and we can accept that, right? Like we know, like when we talked about your video, and we were going back and forth a couple days ago before you posted, we have such an interesting we had such an interesting sort of back and forth, because we would talked about how uh I said, well, maybe we should include how not only is it important to say, well, really, this is a construct, race is a construct, like gender is a construct. We have like absorbed messages from like the world about what it means to be male, what it is to be female, what it is to be black, what it is to be white, what it is to be a black woman, when, you know, all those nuances. And yet, like, we can accept that it's a construct. So no, maybe it shouldn't matter what you are, and yet it becomes really important to acknowledge those differences, because there are people who will treat you differently, you know, claiming those differences and owning those differences, and taking pride in those differences becomes really super important. And mostly because it's also a way to protect yourself, you know, and to know that you have value and you have worth in the world. And when there are so many voices and so many messages that are going to tell minorities, in particular racial minorities, minorities of any kind, you know, sexual orientation, gender expression, all of those things can sort of, there's so many messages telling those people that they don't matter, or that they're less than, like you said, and we absorb them. You can't not, you know, we all have some degree of prejudice, and we are all on this sort of continuum, I think, of making mistakes and then trying to sort of scramble and fix them, and making mistakes and taking responsibility, or sort of finding our way through messing up, that like that prejudice that we're all stuck with, I think we use as like a lens, and we have to retrain ourselves in so many ways to take pride in what we are, and then also acknowledge that like these other people are not always what we, you know, even those tiny mistakes that we might make, or large mistakes we might make, like we can't use that lens to define other people, you know? I don't know. I'm blathering.
No, you're not blabbering at all. You're making a lot of really good sense. I watched this video today. I think it's like a lot of people have seen it. It's about Jane Elliott was on Oprah's show like years ago. It was 1992, I think, and she has this famous experiment where she separates all the people with blue eyes from the people with brown eyes. And she teaches them that inherently the people with blue eyes are less intelligent. They are like messy, they're criminals, or all these things. And while the people who with brown eyes are superior. And this is what she tells them. And so what happens in the society is that the people with brown eyes started feeling more superior.
Right.
And finding reasons to be like, oh yeah, well, you know, that is true, because I do have a blue-eyed friend and they're really dumb, you know. And then the people with blue eyes, they started like pushing back and being like, well, no, we're not dumb. But the second they would get angry or something, it would justify a claim that they were less intelligent. They were rowdy. So based on this belief that had been spoken about them. So she uses it to shine a light onto race, essentially, and be like,
right,
here's a group of people who have been isolated in their, just based on their race, you know, something that they cannot change about them. Race being something we can see, right, by definition. And then globally, like as a culture, we have decided and talked about how like, oh, someone of like, who, let's say, who's white is more superior. They're smarter, they're more educated. They grew up in higher class systems. They've had more funding and education, you know, and then black people are lazy. They're like this, and that. So you start believing it as this mass culture, and the security in the black community, even the people who try to break out, they're loud, you know, they're unintelligent. Oh, they're the exception, you know, to the rule, like in all these things. And
right.
It's simply based on this structure or box we put it in, when we're all there's one race, the human race, right? And we are all actually physically capable of the same, right?
Yeah.
And so, like you said, breaking that lens or that prejudice that we place on ourselves in the mirror, you know, that society's put on us, to say, oh, I am the same and I'm just as capable, if not more capable, and I'm stepping into my power, right? To
Absolutely.
then help utilize and change the perspective and the prejudice that like other people that have been seeing through their own lens, right? It's like when we can educate the younger generations, the world's going to change. You know, like telling little black girls, little, you know, brown boys that they are smart, that they are equal, that they are capable, and then they'll start rising up and being like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Let me hop in the shower before this call because I need to be excited, you know?
Yeah. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the journey that sort of that you've been on, that I've been on, that I think a lot of people are going through right now, of taking pride in our differences and celebrating them, and then realizing that like in order for any of us to win, all of us have to work for it. You know what I mean? That like it becomes not, or rather, in order for all of us to win, each one of us has to put in a little bit more, you know, a little bit more effort, a little bit more self-examination, and a little bit more self-celebration. Like, it's cool. Like, I sit on the side of Black joy all day long. You know what I mean? Like, I totally know what you mean. And I've actually, when you were talking earlier about sort of, consciously walking into situations knowing that people are going to experience you as a Black man, you know, and wanting to sort of anticipate and counteract those assumptions and those stereotypes before you even get there. and how that becomes baked into your personality, becomes baked into how you walk through the world. And in some ways, yeah, coming in with good energy and being totally positive, non-threatening, and whatever, like it of course that's a benefit to anyone in a workspace, no matter what color you are. But certainly it becomes a tool that I think a lot of Black people have, right? When we talk about code switching, for example, how you talk to your family, or your friends of the same ethnicity, the same nationality, same people who might speak your language, right? Like Black folks speak a certain way. Not all of them, of course. Not all of us, of course. But you know, we talk about code switching because there's a way you can talk to your family and your friends. And there's vernacular we can use together that maybe you don't use in a job interview because people don't see that as professional. And that's, you know, while that, I don't really know how I feel about that. I think that we should all be able to communicate with everybody and we should all be able to understand everybody. But at the same time, you know, we also have a problem in this country in particular of thinking our language is the only one. You know, so
Yeah, straight up, it takes like everything now in my mind. Now that I've learned really what culture is, it's like the backpack that you wear every day. You may not always see your culture, but you're holding on to it, right? It's like we have this culture that is taught to us that like if you don't speak English, you know, you're less intelligent. And I saw this meme because I'm living for memes the past like year, you know, I'm just a meme guy. Like this meme, and it was like, oh, it was talking about the queen, like her like granddaughter can speak like 2 languages and she's only 2, and it's like, yeah, so can most immigrants,
right.
you know. And I was like, and like it was this really impressive thing when it was like the royal family's like child, but it's not impressive when it's literally most immigrant children are bilingual.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you're
they're
from
highly
Texas. We live in California. How is it possible that we're still in a place where we can view immigrant groups or bilingual groups as somehow, you know, less than when they can, you know, speak more languages than I can, for sure.
Than I can,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? And it's not. It's so there's no respect. I don't understand it. It pisses me off. But
It's like, whoa.
I know. But there was something I wanted to say, and I went on a tangent, and then I forgot what it was. But I don't know. So I'm so excited to hear what a great like what kind of like growth you've experienced. Is there anything that you feel like really pushed you into that?
Into my personal growth during
Yeah.
thinking. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm, you know, an introvert. I'm just kidding. I'm like the biggest extrovert on the planet. Like I need people to recharge. And so the second we went into a stay-at-home order, I essentially had a mental breakdown. Like it was full on. Like I was like, "What do you mean I can't leave my house and like have to stay here?" And so around like the second or third like room renovation I did, I was like, there's something you're avoiding. You know, there's something you're avoiding because at the exact same time, there were all these world issues that were happening. You know, like George Floyd, like all these things, and it was like, and I was having to stop and stare at them. There was no being busy. There was no like avoidance or doing. It was like you will sit here and you will look at what's happening in the world and what has been happening in the world.
Yeah.
And also, you will sit here and you will feel not just what is happening in the world, but what is happening within yourself.
Yeah.
There's no suppressing that you're here with it, right? And then sitting there and being honest, not honest about the desire to avoid, and then honest about the why.
Yeah.
And so that I was really able to be like, oh, well, you don't want to look at it because that's a mirror of you. That acknowledges that like you feel sad and heartbroken and hurt like by certain things. And it acknowledges that like you've grown up with this mentality that like even though like you've walked into the rooms and you are so charismatic, you're so loving, you're so joyous, like that this joy is put on as a mask like in order to feel like you can be accepted into these rooms instead of just showing up like as you want to be showed up as.
Yeah.
And so like I started being honest about the why. Like, oh, why are you so joyous? Like, why are you so charismatic? Why do you want to be like? Why are you so extroverted? And it's like, oh, you want to be around people because it's based out of a fear of being abandoned, and you don't want to be alone. It's like, well, why don't you want to be alone? And just keep going back to that and being like, these are these learned behaviors. And so during quarantine, which it's been really horrible for a lot of people. And so this is me standing in like me getting to be fortunate, right? Like to have a house that an apartment that I can sit in my room, that I can think, that I can journal. But getting to sit there and honestly just look at me and dissect and be like, this is the truth of who you are, and it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human, and you get to love the shadow. You get to love the hurt. You get to love the broken, and now like let's pull that in and say it's okay. And today I wake up, like you said, like today I was tired. Like you felt tired today. And I'm so glad you said that right when we had this call. Like, I'm so glad you're like, man, like, I'm glad to take a shower to wake up. Like,
you just gotta be where you are,
Yeah, you have to. And that deserves to be celebrated, The fact that you would still come on alive when you don't really feel like it, have a conversation, like to do these things deserves to be celebrated, and that we don't have to show up in with the cultural belief of how we need to be showing up into rooms, that we truly get to be who we are. Yeah. And when you can look at yourself and love yourself as you are, right? Like whether that be happy or sad or lonely or like hell, like when you can sit in that and say, hey, I love me here today, right now, it changes everything.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And it's so impressive because it is, this has been such a difficult time of self-reflection, and it's asked a lot of everyone, and there are people who are actively turning away from that challenge, and there are those who are really trying to receive it, and to accept it and to say, okay, this is where we're at, and I'm going to take this on and use it to learn something new about myself, about other people, and to ask myself the hard questions, which is so challenging. It is so difficult to look yourself in the mirror and to realize that you have doubts about like where you've been up to this point, and I think about that in terms of sort of this project too, and how we've like, as a culture, we're being asked to reflect on our own privilege and reflect on our own prejudices, and how difficult that is for people, and myself included, like I have to constantly check and say like, did I realized that I the other day had an experience where I was like, ooh, that was some like unconscious implicit bias shit that I didn't even think about until it happened. And then I went, oop, nope, shouldn't have done that. Okay, not super impressed with myself there. You know what I mean? And then say, okay, that sucked. Or it wasn't like a racist incident, but it was, it was something where I just noticed myself having a thought, and I stopped it, and then I was like, okay, let me refocus this, ask myself why I felt that way, question, you have to go through those questions to say like, hey, where am I at? Even me, even you, even people of color, we all have to stop and question ourselves, you know what I mean? And reflect on this stuff, because nobody's immune from criticism. We're all on this continuum. That was something that I was reading about today, that like, we're not going to get it 100% of the time, and that goes for pretty much everything. We can't all be happy all the time. We can't all be perfect all the time. We can't all, always be at 100%, but damn, it's important to notice when you're not,
yes. Yeah. And when you ask yourself the question, you have got to be honest with the answer, right? So in the quarantine, when I asked myself, when all these the Black Lives Matter movement was ramping up and all these things was happening, I was like, like people was like, silence is like you talked about how silence was murder, was the whole like it was
Like,
the
yeah,
whole,
it's, yeah,
yeah, and
complicity, not an
yeah,
option.
yeah, it's not an option. And I was like, well, why am I being silent? And it was because when I asked myself, was there any prejudice in here? You know, the answer was yes, and I've been saying no. You know, I was like, oh no, like I'm fine, like I'm fine. I'm like, oh no, you have to honestly look at that. Like even it may be like 10-year-old self, like, but you got to look at that, and
Yeah,
to like bring it up and be real about it and be like, wow, I've got to take responsibility for that. Like
yeah,
I'm a person of color who has to take responsibility for the prejudice I've shown against myself and
yeah.
my brothers and sisters who look like me. You know, like, woo, that's hard. Blah, blah, blah.
I know it's so uncomfortable because we've just learned, we've also absorbed so many messages about what racism is, when in fact you can be like, you can have racial prejudice. We all do. We all function with the understanding that stereotypes exist. I can identify some of them. We know what that means. And it's very hard to exist in the world without that. Now, do we want to use it as like the bedrock to stand on? No, the movement right now is an attempt to reverse that and work on anti-racism, right? Instead of just ignoring it and shoving it away and saying it's not a problem, or, you know, we all want to be colorblind. No, let's look at all of these categories we talk about people in, right? Nationality, race, culture, ethnicity, and start to use these things as tools to work with other people, to understand other people better, to know like what they might be dealing with, so we can then use that knowledge to help make a more peaceful and more like well-functioning society. And the fact that it's taken this, it's, well, and it's not done yet, you know what I mean? Like I almost said it's the fact that it's taken this long to get there. I mean, there have been people fighting for that for hundreds of years, and there will be people fighting for that for hundreds more. And that's what's sort of depressing about it all. But it doesn't mean that it's time to run away and pack it in and you know, and halt the progress. So,
and the gratitude for like, you know, the people this year 2020. I think it's so interesting that, you know, the whole year was like vision 2020. Like everybody before, like in 2019 when it was gearing up for 2020, like we have vision for the future and all these things and 2020 vision. And then like I read this thing, it said the world's not getting worse. The veil's just lifting and we're able to see it for what it actually is, right? And the gift in 2020 is that all the veils were lifted. And like our vision now has become clear on what the world looks like and how this whole paradigm has to shift into a new one. And like sitting at home by ourselves, being forced to look at the world, look at ourselves, is exactly what the world needed in order to get to the point where we have to change. We have to.
Yeah.
For our culture, for, you know, for everything, for the children, for ourselves. Like,
it can only bring us to a better place. That was such a great, that was a wonderful way to, like, I think we should wrap it up. I think that was dope.
Yeah, I mean,
that gave me so much peace and so much life. Devin, it's so good to see you. Hugs. Thank you so much for participating in the project. I'm so happy to have you here, and I know that everybody else is too. It's been great, and I love this topic, and I love that we got to talk a little bit about it. I'm sure next time we see each other, we'll get to talk more in person, and unfortunately, our viewers won't be there to see that. But I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm super excited too, and I just want to say thank you for taking this on 19For20. It's so necessary. And like in the comments you can see like people are like just straight up like, I've loved this series, this has been so amazing, so educational. And even for myself, like I was so excited when you asked me, because I was like, yes, I've been following along, I've been learning. And it's like you're educating, and it's like, yeah, that's what's going to heal the world. So thank you for your healing.
Thanks.
For saying
and
yes.
It takes a lot. I do want to say this, it takes a lot for us to get up here and speak publicly about our opinions and the things we feel and our personal experiences, our personal identities. And it's public, you know, and it can be uncomfortable. I think we're all in the process of still sort of figuring out what the world looks like and really having to confront ourselves in our own lives, like we've just been talking about. And I'm also so grateful for the people watching, and for the fans and for the people who are here with us commenting along and watching this series and being willing to engage with us on it and to ask questions of us. I think that's incredible. That's exactly what I wanted this to do, because I think it's important for people to see that, you know, even the people on TV like are confused and lost. It doesn't make us any smarter, any more prepared to deal with the challenges that we face in life. And I love that we have people watching us also who are holding us accountable and who are putting us in the position to question ourselves and to learn more. Because we, of course, again, we come at this stuff from a privileged position, whether we're black, white, or whatever. We're also, you know, we work on television, which comes with its own privileges and its own level of notoriety, and you know, people listen to us for better and worse. So it's important for us to put ourselves in the position to be here, be vulnerable, but also to be willing to accept some level of criticism and questioning, you know, because we got blind spots too. So thank you so much for putting yourself out there like this. And I'm really grateful for you and for all of our participants and for all of our viewers, because you guys are participants too. So I'm sorry, I was looking down at the comment section like you guys were all there looking at me. So I will look into the camera and say thank you guys, I love you.
Thank you. Okay, have the best rest of your day, Barrett.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. I hope.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.